go down.
Okay, so we should be live on YouTube now.
So I'm on your PowerScripting podcast. I don't see like a live button.
It may show up here any second.
Gotcha.
Because we just went live. I can send you a link.
Cool. There it is. Okay.
There we go. I see it now. All right, so let me mute this because that's going to be bad feedback.
Well, you can just, you just need to mute your YouTube, right? That's it?
Yeah.
We're still going to talk to Skype.
Yeah, hopefully it won't lag too bad.
Okay.
But yeah, all the audio will be through Skype. So on my side, I have 2 different instances of Skype running, and they're both going through processing hardware into my machine and then into Reaper, where they're going into separate channels. And then my microphone's going through processing and then going through being recorded. And then I'm doing a mix minus back out to YouTube. So I don't. I'm not feeding your same audio back to you.
Oh yeah.
It's
a thing.
It's probably overkill.
No, it's just about right.
All right.
Good times. Hey, there they are. Look at that. We got people showing up in chat. So,
right
John,
on.
are you usually doing it from YouTube chat, or are we doing the streaming channel in Discord as well?
We do either one. Lately, most of the people have been in the YouTube chat.
Yeah.
That has been more popular. I try and keep an eye on both, but lately it has pretty much been the YouTube chat.
Sounds good. I'll pull it up here.
Let's see.
Oh, wow. There's a long video lag. I have to not look at that. I'll get myself confused.
Yeah, it's not great.
But that's okay. I mean, I'll just confuse myself. I just watched myself put my drink down, turn back to the screen, and watched myself take a drink.
I was just logged into the work YouTube, and so yeah, it's funny. I I was about to post this chocolatey software. That's probably not what you want.
Why? I thought we had it set up so that it would automatically tweet when we started. I guess not. I don't see it.
So
I could throw something out quick if you want.
yes, that's a good idea. PowerScripting. If you want to post it, I'll retweet it.
I just did.
Okay, awesome. Uh-oh, the echo. All right.
Yeah, I was telling Mike, sorry, I got started a little late. I was lifting weights and realized, wait a minute, it's I need a podcast. I need to stop right now and go set up.
Yeah, that kind of happens a little bit. I that happened to me today with Power Lunch. I totally forgot just a little bit because we were just up late last night doing work, and so right afterwards, being like, "Oh, hey, by the way, I have this thing that I've committed to every Wednesday at lunch," and so people started pinging me and saying, "Hey, by the way, is this still happening?" And it's like, "Oh, yeah. Yes."
Yes.
I missed it completely, and I felt guilty when I saw Thomas post the screenshot. And I was like, oh. And then at first I was like, oh, I could still make it. And then I realized I was late by like 45 minutes.
We hung out for, I think, a good hour and a half there, almost 2 hours. It was crazy today because I think people were feeling a little in a funk today. I think everybody was just sort of, a little bit off with this whole thing. And so it was sort of a low key one, which I liked. We didn't have, normally when Mike is there, we tease him for like half the time. So we didn't get to do that. Missed out on that. But then that's where I left at the opportunity to come back and say hello.
Okay, is Mike, you say your last name Kanakos? How do you say your last name?
Kanakos.
Kanakos. And Adil, how do you say your name?
Ligari.
Adil Ligari.
Mm-hmm. You got it.
All right. Are we all ready?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Tonight on the PowerScripting podcast, I am very happy to have with us Mike Kanakos, and I have a special guest host with me, Adil. Shoot.
Ligari.
Ligari. It went straight out of my head.
Just yeah. Loosely translates to the train station in French, so it's not
okay.
really
Until the train station.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, guys. How are you? Thanks for having me on tonight.
Very cool. Yeah, so Hal cannot be with us. He is learning how to homeschool, as so many people are at this particular time in history. We've been homeschooling for our children's whole academic careers up until college for my son, so it's old hat for us, other than all the Zoom stuff that's going on. But because my wife teaches ASL, and so she's teaching over video, and my daughter takes classes at, which oddly enough, at a very small homeschool co-op, which just happened to be the first school in the nation to have somebody test positive for COVID-19.
Oh, yeah.
If you can believe that.
Oh,
but
not an award you want to win.
Yeah, he and his dad were traveling in Italy and got it there, and then came back and figured out that they had it. And so I've been working home for quite a while because as soon as I found out, I'm like, you want me to go home? My boss is like, yeah. You should go work from home. And that was, a couple weeks before everybody got sent home. But nobody ended up getting it, and the people who had it are fine. So it all worked out.
I have been home for 4 weeks.
Okay.
And it's not bad, but my boys definitely like to come in and be a part of whatever's going on. So that's the challenge.
Oh, sure.
And we don't homeschool or anything. My wife is not a teacher. I'm not a teacher. So there's that whole adjusting to that whole thing. And on top of it, I started a new job, and on day 4, they sent me home.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
Yeah. And actually, day 3, my manager went to the UK, and the next morning I drove into work, and I just didn't put 2 and 2 together with coronavirus. I pull in, company's got 500 employees, so the parking lot's pretty full. I pull in, and there's nobody in the parking lot. And I guess it's a sign of the times. The first thing I thought of was, oh my God, someone called in a bomb threat.
Oh, right, yeah.
Right, because the place is empty. So when I walk up, the security guard says, oh yeah, someone tested positive, or they think they tested positive for coronavirus. And I was like, what? I didn't even have to process it. I didn't even have my VPN set up yet, so I had.
That's what I was gonna ask. Is the first thing, right? Like, you're in a new job. Sorry, guys. I guess there's an ambulance going by. Great timing. So you were in a new job. Did you have access to VPN yet?
Well, so the interesting thing was so they had some employees from the company standing outside in the back, and the security guard said, just go around the back and they'll set you up with whatever you need. So I had my laptop, and I'm talking to this woman. And so I said, just started. She says, just go home, log into your VPN, and you can do everything like you do just in the office. And I was like,
and she was not in that when she was telling you.
Yes. And I was like, I'm on the IT team. She's like, oh, okay. So then just go home and VPN. And I'm like, but I don't have the VPN yet. She's like, oh, that's not good. So I ended up jumping on the wireless from the parking lot.
I might need an RSA token or something.
And then I got set up, so it worked out pretty good.
Right on. Yeah, I was quarantined. So because in Canada, when you fly back from anywhere, they ask you to self-quarantine for 14 days.
Okay.
So I was flying back from training a colleague in Portland, and as soon as I got back, a few days later, I guess they closed the borders for non-essential travel. So the recommendation was, and now they're requiring it, but originally it was a recommendation to self-quarantine, so don't expose yourself at all. Get your groceries ordered, whatever you need to, but just stay home, because you don't want to be that attack vector, right? Coming in from
for sure.
somewhere else. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You don't want to be patient zero for all your friends.
Yeah.
It is interesting, though. I mean, we're way off topic here, but it is interesting, though, to see with all the stuff going on, and then you see video of people not doing any social distancing at all, and like you just wonder, like, what are you thinking? But that's a whole other story.
You mean Florida?
Yeah. Well, apparently at any Home Depot as well, at least the one by me.
Oh no.
Oh
yeah.
No, we are doing. There's a lot of stuff Home Depot's doing, so they're limiting the number of people in the store.
I didn't
to 100.
I'm sorry.
And they have a line outside that it's taped every 6 feet to make sure that if you're in line to get into the store, you're, that far apart. But once you're in the store, all bets are off.
Well, so they did do all that. But the first time I went, I was going to pick up some caulk of all things. And it was like 5 guys all around the white silicone caulk. And I was like, I'll just come back, guys. It's not that important.
Yeah.
So hold on, where are we? Phil's asking in the chat, and we've seen this before. Is Nico going to make an appearance here on the PowerScripting? Because I think that's usually what we see. He's usually pretty eager to be around.
Maybe I can get a guest appearance to come. I was trying to get him to not appear. So Nico is my 11-year-old son who loves to get involved in all things my user group. He's usually on every meeting, whether I want him to be or not. And being that it was going to be sort of like a one-on-one conversation, I just didn't know how that was going to go tonight. So I asked him to kind of hang tight. And he is supposed to be going to bed. But
well,
there's that.
Tell him we're live streaming on YouTube. That may get his attention.
Oh yeah, I did send him the link. So no matter how much I lay down the law, I always cave. So I sent him the link.
So we're chatting because I know you guys, at least somewhat.
yeah, exactly.
But we should probably tell everybody about you first, Mike.
Sure.
So, Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, your IT career, and what you're doing now?
Sure. So my name's Mike Kanakos. I was originally from New York, moved down to North Carolina, and I am a Active Directory admin, which is more on the identity side now. That's, on-prem AD is becoming a commonplace thing. So starting to move more into Azure AD, identity, certificates, all that kind of stuff. I work for a company called Align Technology. They make Invisalign braces.
Oh, yeah.
And it's been, I've just been with them for 5 weeks. It's been pretty awesome. I've helped run a user group, RTP SUG, Research Triangle PowerShell Users Group. We've been growing like crazy. This year I started doing some work with PowerShell.org on the community side. I write, I do a lot of things. So I've got my fingers into a lot of different stuff, but career-wise, classic sysadmin, started as a consultant, help desk, moved up in the help desk, moved on to like senior support stuff, then on to servers, and just kept going from there. And for some reason just fell into sort of an AD role. And I've always had a preference for AD and all things AD.
Yeah, I mean, if you're the domain admin, that's kind of the top of the heap right there.
Yeah, but it's so interesting how that's the first thing everybody wants. Hey, can I get domain admin?
No, you cannot.
Yes. Well, I always ask, so what do you need domain admin for? And they always say something that has nothing to do with domain admin.
I need to run something on one local computer. Yeah.
I've got to install software on a server. I think I need domain admin.
I have a quick question here. That's interesting. I'm curious, John, from PowerScripting perspective. Is this the first time that we have a user group leader who has a user group meeting on the same night as his PowerScripting talk?
As far as I know, yes, that's a first.
Yeah. So when we booked this, there was no coronavirus, and my Wednesday night meeting, third Wednesday of the month, would normally be at 6:30 p.m. So that wouldn't have been an issue. But the great thing about my group, I get a lot of the credit for the group because I tweet a lot, and I'm probably the most vocal. But the group is 5 guys, and we all pitch in, we all do stuff. So like tonight, the other guys are doing the work tonight, which honestly, it makes it easy for me if I need to step away. It's not one person that has to do everything.
The power of the community.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it was cool to be invited, and this is a huge privilege for me. Totally excited for this. But it is a little odd to be missing a user group meeting that has, from what I'm told, about 85 people in the meeting right now.
Oh, nice. So, Adil, you want to talk about yourself a little bit? Introduce yourself. I know you're well known in the community. if you've ever seen a cool PowerShell sticker, or if you've seen our new logos,
a little bit, yeah. So it's funny. So I'll mention that a little bit, and I'll also mention how I ran into you two, because y'all are part of my journey for sure. So I'm a senior solutions architect with Chocolatey Software. I used to be just working at the university here, and actually met a bunch of you at last summit, which was my first summit, and so kind of got introduced to a lot of the PowerShell community about a year or two before that in the PowerShell chat. So the PowerShell Slack and Discord showed up there, and starting asking some questions, and then eventually just started helping people when I could answer some of those questions, and hung out in Bridge a lot, because that's the channel that's bridged between Slack, Discord, and IRC. So that's where I met a lot of you for the first time, and talked to Mike a bunch. Mike was actually one of the first guys I saw last year at PowerShell Summit. He had that beer event, I think, at the brewery. Yeah, that was very cool, that meetup. So like meeting Mike and sort of getting that welcoming was very cool. And on top of that, then actually like having that first event, the first night event at PowerShell Summit where we pick up our badges, and then seeing John there was kind of unbelievable for me, because for the past like 3 or 4 years, I often listened to the PowerScripting podcast on my way coming into my commute. I had about an hour commute either way, and it was the perfect amount of content for me, and sort of getting deeper into the PowerShell community. I was loving that piece of it. So I got the opportunity at last summit to say hello to John and thank him for all the amazing content. And I was like, where's Hal? So I was super excited to see you guys, and sort of just, it happened from there. I spent a lot of time with the sticker thing. So I'm the resident sticker artist in the community. So I have a GitHub repo called PS Design, and generally for any PowerShell project, any open source PowerShell project where they need some help with the design aspect of it, I generally donate my services for free, because I like playing with artsy things like that. So if anybody has a PowerShell project they want a logo or a sticker made for, happy to contribute.
Yeah, my favorite one is still the one you did for PS Cohen's.
Oh, you like that?
Yeah, that is my favorite.
Yeah, the little avatar style logo.
Yeah, because
yeah.
I'm actually watching that series again. I watched it with my son. Now I'm watching it with my daughter.
Oh, so good.
Yeah, it's my favorite TV series of all time. So, I mean, I watched all the Naruto stuff, and that was amazing, incredible. But I think Avatar is still my favorite.
We're not talking about the movie at all, right?
No, we're not.
Cool.
So you guys know that I have an interesting story about meeting both of you separately. So I never used to hang out in the Bridge channel because I was chicken, because there's a lot of big name people in there. And honestly, there's no reason for me to be chicken, because everybody's been super nice always. But I was always like, I'm not going to ask a question of these guys. There's no way. I'm not going to embarrass myself.
It's the whole imposter syndrome thing, right?
Yeah. So
we all have it.
I actually asked the question one night about getting the computer or something like that. And Adel responds, and he's like, oh, yeah, so-and-so, I saw this cool article on it, and he sends me the link of my own article. And he's like, wait, you're the guy who wrote this.
Yeah, that was unbelievable for me. I was like, hey, I love this article. Yeah.
So that's how I that's how I met you. And then Jonathan, I met at Summit last year for the first time, and we were in the elevator with Ashley McGlone, and you hadn't met me yet, and we were going up the elevator, coming back from a long day, and you guys were talking about something, and Jonathan made this comment. He's like, yeah, there's this guy I'm looking for here that I heard he's got like 800 people in his user group. And it was the bizarrest experience ever, because I'm standing right there and he's talking about what I think is me. Yeah. And I'm like, that's me. He's like, that's you? And I'm like, yeah, that's me. And then the elevator opens up. Ashley goes to his room. And then Jonathan and I just talked, I think, on the 10th floor for like 20 minutes. And then he politely was like, well, I have to go get something to eat. And I was like, okay, cool. But it was so bizarre to hear him reference me while I'm standing there. Because first of all, I had just met Ashley 20 minutes earlier, and Ashley's like one of those guys that is a total hero of mine. I've read his articles my entire career. So here I am, wow, I'm with Ashley McGlone, and then here's this guy talking about the user group, and I'm like, what bizarro world am I in right now? But I've had so many experiences like that.
Yeah, Ashley is...
Sorry, go ahead. You go, Tom.
Ashley is one of those guys, too, he is just so fun to talk to. Mm-hmm. He's such a great guy.
And the crazy thing about Ashley is when I'm around him, like I'm scared whether I should turn my phone to airplane mode, just because he can compromise anything that he gets near. He's the security guy, and it's like Thomas Rainer has often recommended to me, like, yeah, just don't leave your laptop on around.
But he couldn't
you
be
two
nicer.
Were in an elevator with him. Yeah, he's super nice.
Yeah, we went to dinner. We had Indian food together for an hour and a half, and I mean, he was just so gracious. Here's this guy who just started talking to him, and we chatted it up a little bit. And he's like, "Look, you want to go to dinner?" And a couple of us tagged along. But the guy obviously has a lot of recognition. He's well known. He has a big following, and we went out to dinner and we just chatting it up like a bunch of regular people. That's like the best thing about like the community and Summit and the whole thing. We all know this, but just so interesting to walk in and meet those people, and the people that. For any one particular person that may be a hero of theirs or some mentor, or somebody they've looked up to because they've read their articles, and you can just chat it up with that person, and there's no sort of pretentiousness at all. There's nothing like the PowerShell community that I've ever been a part of. It's still, even after doing this for a few years, it's still pretty hard for me to realize that nobody really has a hidden agenda.
Yeah.
So welcoming, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I've definitely had that experience. It's the first time actually I've been a part of a tech community like that. The last couple of years that I was like such open arms all around.
So you two are like almost role models for the PowerShell community in terms of you got involved, not the earliest, right? You two are both relatively new to the community and have just taken off, right? You've just embedded yourselves into the community. So how did that happen for you guys?
I'll let you go first, Ado.
Oh, right. I'm Canadian, so I have to be like, I'm sorry, you first. No, it's funny. So I think basically being a part of the, and we talked about this a little bit, John, at last summit, sort of getting your introduction to PowerShell. How did you start, right? I think for me, the big thing was a colleague left our team at UBC and back at the day, and he was the PowerShell guy. He built a lot of PowerShell scripts and built a couple modules that we were using as a team. And I became the guy then automatically. I inherited all those scripts, and I suddenly had to start getting up to speed really quickly. This is about 3.5, maybe 4 years ago, 3-ish. And so at that time, it was sort of like a lot of getting up to speed, and I stumbled across a lot of videos, stumbled across PowerScripting podcast, and then I started getting direction to go towards the PowerShell Slack and Discord. And so I just showed up there, started asking questions, and one of the first tweets that I had out in the community was saying, if you ever are looking for a tech community that's very welcoming, that supports each other and wants each other to really win, then come join the PowerShell community, because there's nothing like that I've seen ever in my years in tech. So, and a lot of those guys like Mike and yourself and a lot of us in the community, we do a really good job of propping people up and combating a lot of that imposter syndrome. Because in the beginning, I was very much like, oh, I'm going to ask these questions, but I'm not sure I have any expertise to answer them. And a couple of guys nudged me forward to say, hey, you should start. I said, well, I'm not sure if I know this, but here's some information. Started showing up in Bridge a lot and PowerShell Help and starting to answer some of those questions, talking to some of the guys who were always in there, like Joel Sallow and people like Fred Weinman, from Microsoft, and a lot of other people from Microsoft, and sort of when you start seeing engagement from the PowerShell team themselves, from the Microsoft perspective, right? Then it's really cool to see that the actual team for the very technology you're working on is a part of that community.
Yeah,
and
it's amazing.
It's really cool to see like Joey and Steve and Jason Helmick now and Tyler Leonhardt all show up and be big parts of it. And in fact, that's sort of like where I also got that sort of nudge to do that coming to Summit. At the time, the university was not paying for any travel. We have public sector rules here. So in Canada, where you have to disclose a lot of that stuff, and they don't want to allocate a lot of funding, which I didn't agree with at the time. So that's kind of where I paid out of pocket to come to Summit the first time. And that was a big thing for me. But like just meeting y'all there and having that experience and sort of like actually that being my first Summit, last one, and now actually submitting a talk to this Summit and being accepted as a speaker was kind of mind blowing. And so that's what I was really looking forward to. And then
it got canceled.
Yeah, so that's me. I'll let Mike speak now more so.
Well, I don't have as eloquent story to tell. Mine's a little bit more chaotic. I can tell you that I guess now it's been about 6 years. I had been a sysadmin for a while, and I was starting to get kind of burnt out. Now, I have to say that I didn't grow up with the command line. I was always a GUI admin. So when you hear about these guys that have done command line their entire career, that's just not me. But I remember reading about PowerShell, and this is really around PowerShell 3. And I remember saying, I got to learn this, and I stuck with it a little bit. But I remember the very first time I tried to do it, I said, the next call that comes into the help desk, I'm going to solve a PowerShell. It was like reset a password or something, and it took me like an hour and a half. I had no idea what I was doing. Then I realized, like, I better put some time in, and like work on this in some sort of organized fashion. And I kind of stick with that for a while, and I kind of got the PowerShell bug for a while, but I didn't really get good at it or anything like that. And then somewhere along the way, I always wanted to write. I always thought about being a trainer, but then I'm lazy. And I was like, look, I'm not going to be a trainer because you're going to have to get like 65 certs a year, and I'm never going to get that done. So I kind of let that go, and I always thought I was going to write. And I had the best empty blogs for years with the best themes with no content on them. And then one day, I remember this distinctly. It was a January night. It was freezing cold in North Carolina where I live. And I had followed some blogs, and I was watching 4 sysops, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to ask this dude if I can write an article. I don't care. Whatever he says, what can you do? Say no. So I wrote an article. And I didn't know at the time that Michael, the guy who runs the website, was in Europe, in Germany, and he responded immediately. He's like, "Tell me about yourself." And I didn't have a chance to back out. He told me to write me an article, so I did it. And then I kind of got the bug of the writing. And after I did that, I was like, "Man, I got to learn more because I really don't know what I'm doing." And I went to a local PowerShell group meeting in my area. I found a meetup, and I met Phil from my group. And the guys were just the super nicest guys, but it was the most odd experience because RTP is supposed to be like this big area for tech and stuff. And we had like 8 people showing up. And I was like, I don't understand. Why is there nobody here? And I went to the meetings for a while, off and on. And then I went to Summit. I talked my job into sending me to Summit. And I had no idea if I even belonged there or not. But I was just like, yeah, you got to send me. It's definitely the thing to do. And I went and I came back. I met a bunch of people there, and I said to myself when I go there, I'm going by myself. I know nobody there. I know a bunch of the names on the list of who's going to be there. I'm just going to open my mouth and say hello to everybody and see what happens. The worst thing that happens is I'll be stuck there for a week and not know anybody. So I came back, and I was talking to the guys, and I'm like, guys, I think I can get some of these people to talk at our group. Would you mind if I help out? And it kind of just went from there. Everything that kind of came up was like someone just giving me a chance and me being dumb enough to say yes to everything, whether I could do it or not. And
really
sometimes
organic, right?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's been not as smooth as I would have liked it because I've gotten myself into some things that were maybe over my skill set or something I didn't know how to do. But it was kind of refreshing to see these people sort of be like, no, give it a shot. You could do it. We'll see what happens. And that's kind of what's happened. I keep meeting people. They keep getting into conversations with me, and we keep talking about stuff, and they go like, oh, maybe you want to do this. And I just keep saying yes. And my wife would prefer if I said no, so that I have some free time. But that's what I keep doing, and I keep getting more and more stuff. And I think it's the New York thing as well. I'm not shy, so. But yeah, sure. I do have a hard time saying no, as James Petty is making fun of me in the chat right now.
You should probably plug your last talk at Summit. Actually, that was really cool, Mike. So that was part of that module that you were working on too.
So you know, this is really odd because I book speakers, and all the time I'm like, dude, you got it, you can do this. And then someone asks me about the stuff I write, and I'm like, it's not that great. I wrote an AD module called PSAD Health, and I'm not going to say I wrote it because I wrote it with Stevie Coaster and Greg Onstadt, who goes by the name Dominion on Twitter. Two super cool guys, just willing to help me out. I mean, Stevie Coaster, if anybody knew how much that dude helps me behind the scenes, I probably owe him money. I probably have taken away pay from him.
He's part of the reason I'm here at Chocolatey, very much so. Yeah.
So we cobbled together a module that was based on a chapter I wrote for the PowerShell conference book. It's an AD module that's a little different than other AD modules. We try to check things that get forgotten by other tools. So we check like directory services records, replication, all that kind of stuff. So it's been a really positive experience, but I hesitate to take credit for that because I probably couldn't build that on my own without the help of those two guys. They deserve equal, if not more, credit for that module than me. But I get the credit for it because I did the talk, and sometimes I feel guilty about that.
But still, it's a lot of work that you have put into it, honestly. And I have seen what you've done with that module and sort of presenting about it and watching about it on YouTube after as well with your talk. I think it's a huge amount of credit, and this is something us tech guys need to be a little bit better at is taking credit for things, because I think we do put a lot of our heart and soul into this. But I think it's a credit to our community that we do very much to prop other people up in the process. I can tell you that Thomas Rayner is one of those guys for me. So Thomas has been the guy from very beginning who's kind of kept pushing me in my boundaries to do a lot of things, and every project that he's stuck my name on in terms of modules and stuff like that I've contributed to, and other projects like BridgeConf. It's very much other community members wanting to push us up. So at the same time, I think we have to take a little bit of credit there, right, too, because we do put a lot of hard work in there.
I'm certainly proud of the work I've done. I definitely could probably use a little bit more confidence in some of the stuff I do. I consider myself an intermediate scripter. My notoriety that I've gotten in the community is because of being outspoken and willing to get people to do stuff more so than like I was talking to Jonathan earlier, but like a guy like Josh Duffney or Adam Bertram. Those guys just write amazing code. That's not me. I can't produce volumes of code, but I'm very good at networking and getting people together to do things. And so I still have to come a long way with the code. I don't probably need to slow down a little bit with the talking to other people and let some other people take over. But that's the New York in me.
But at the same time, John, I would say like community building, right? Wouldn't you say is a big part of this whole community? That's what makes us sort of great, right? Part of it. So I think that's a huge thing Mike does for sure, where he's out there all the time in a lot of those individual user group meetings, but just on Twitter, on the articles and everything. Like, that's a huge part of this. I think that's why people feel so happy to be here, right?
Absolutely.
Well, that's kind of interesting, and I kind of thought about that earlier today, thinking that might come up today, because what I think about that is, while I may be outspoken, it's the imposter syndrome thing, and just a lot of tech guys are introverts in general. A lot of people could do the same thing that I do if they just had a little bit more confidence in themselves to talk about things. I've just gotten over the worry of talking and reaching out and putting myself out there with people. I would like to say that I've accomplished a lot of things on my own, but really I've accomplished a lot of things because I've been giving a lot of opportunities from other people in the community that are willing to take a chance in me. So I would definitely encourage other people to let others know that you're willing to try to do things. That's all you need to do. Once you do that, someone will take the time to say, hey, I think there's an opportunity for you here. And from there, it kind of goes.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I have a question from Ryan for both of you. So
Ryan Yates, hey, our fellow fellow host. Yeah.
So
happy belated.
Yeah, happy belated, Ryan. That was very cool. The video and everything like that he pointed to as well in the community was one of the fun of the projects to be part of. Yeah.
Yes. So for those of our listeners who may not know, a bunch of people from the PowerShell community got together and sent videos in and it was who compiled that? Was that you, Mike?
I, as usual, was the mouthpiece to get some people. Okay. Adil did the work behind the scenes.
And so they put together a happy birthday video for Ryan, which was very cool.
Well, specifically because it was tough in the social isolation where he couldn't really celebrate a 30th birthday, and he wanted time to go out and see his son, but he couldn't because of that stuff. So we felt especially for him a little bit, and he's such a pillar to the community. We just wanted to recognize him a bit more. So, but Ryan wants to know who from the PowerShell community or who from the PowerShell world would you most like to have like a one-on-one, sit down, have a coffee, have a beer with, that kind of thing?
Oh, I could totally go first. Go for it. Because it just happened. So I just got to spend an hour hanging out with Don Jones one-on-one.
Oh, cool.
We had a call yesterday. And so the two guys for me, at Summit, I was standing in the Sunday night pre-thing, and we're all sitting around tables, and Jeffrey Snover comes over, and he's just standing next to me, and he's like, so tell me what you're doing. And I was like, I have no idea what to say to this individual. That was like mind-blowing to me. I would love to get a do-over on that moment, but that can't happen. But for me, after Jeffrey Snover, it was always Jeff Hicks and Don Jones, and I've been lucky enough to now possibly call them almost friends, acquaintances. I talk to Jeff every week. Don, I've been doing some work with on some other things. I reached out to him for some advice on, I'm trying to bring the Community Heroes thing around.
Oh, good. Good.
So we could talk about that.
You'll actually get it done.
Yeah.
So I mean, honestly, talking to Don is just like the biggest, like, oh my God, that was the best moment ever. That's awesome. That's a really good answer. I don't even know if I can follow that, Mike. It's funny. There's so many people, including the two of you in this community, that I kind of like got blown away the first time I actually met in person. And so you get a lot of bit like y'all feel like celebrities to me sometimes. Still, I pinch myself that I'm actually in rooms and talks with you at the same time and podcasts. But I'd have to say, like, probably two of the most welcoming, like getting involved with sort of recently with Pacific Northwest PowerShell user group and hanging out with people from the PowerShell team like Tyler and Joey and also Thomas Rayner. Those guys. Spending the time with me to actually help found and set up a user group together for Pacific Northwest out of Seattle. That's been really cool for me. Those guys would say, and I'm cheating here because I don't want to mention one person, but probably the most fun guy, one of the most easiest people to talk to, we all know from the PowerShell community. Every time you see him, he's been on Power Lunch and other things, is Jason Helmick. He's just, he's so much fun to be around. Like anytime you talk to him, he's like a warm hug.
Now, both of you, if you ever get a chance to talk to Lee Holmes,
ooh, yeah,
you need to talk to him because he is always into something just crazy.
Fellow Canadian, right? I think originally. Yeah,
he may be.
Yeah,
but if you ever get a chance to talk to him, just ask him like what he's doing, what he's got going on, or what he's geeking out about. Because the last time I talked to him, he was planning to go do this crazy road course in Europe. Like driving, racing. And he actually wrote a book about it. He wrote an ebook about how to prepare to do this. And he's like studying all the corners and he's figuring out like the angles and stuff. And he's telling me all about this. And it's just, you never know what it's going to be with that guy. I mean, one time he was all excited. He was learning calligraphy. And I mean, that guy is astonishing to me. He's always into something different and interesting, and he is just so much fun to talk to.
He's the quintessential lifetime learner that way, right?
Oh,
like he's always into something new.
To the nth degree. Mm-hmm. Really, he is. So if you ever get a chance to talk to Lee Holmes, just ask him what he's doing. Ask him what he's into, and it'll be a treat for you.
So Adil, you know that I have some interesting stories and funny anecdotes, things that have happened, right, with the Thomas Rayner thing and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I'm starting to realize, because I may be banned by Lee Holmes. I'm not banned. I'm not banned, but I definitely almost made him late at the summit last year for his keynote talk, because we were sitting at the table and I came over and he did chat it up with me. We were just talking, and I wanted to ask him a question about a security setting, and I was like a deer in the headlights. I was like, I'm talking to Lee Holmes. This is great. And he's answering my question, and I couldn't figure out that he was trying to get out of the conversation politely to get to his keynote talk. So he may not remember me fondly. He probably was like, that dude, he wouldn't let me go.
Yeah. Because he didn't want to say sorry. He had to go. It's very much Lee, though. Yeah. To answer a big question. Nice. Yeah, and then turn around and go do a keynote. That's Lee. Sounds like him for sure.
So one of the things I want to talk to you about, Mike, is I have an Active Directory background. I did that sort of management, group policy, that kind of stuff for years. But it was years ago, and it was before the Azure Active Directory stuff. So what is managing directory services like now, where you've probably got domain controllers on premises, and maybe you've got Azure AD stuff going on because you're doing Office 365, and you've got, authentication stuff going back and forth to the cloud. How does that work?
So, it's an interesting topic you bring up, because that has not been a smooth transition for me, and it's something I'm still sort of adjusting to. I was the classic on-prem AD guy that you just mentioned. And I kind of rode that out for a long time. And I always wanted to do more Azure stuff. But, for me, Azure is intimidating because there's like 1,000 services in the Azure cloud, right? So where do you start?
And they're always changing. And right. Where do you find the documentation? You read something and you're like, you need to figure out when it was written because it may be different now.
So I feel like Azure AD is almost like relearning AD over again. You have to kind of forget what you learned. The
one thing I will call out there specifically with Azure is those dem module names, bro. Like the functions and everything. It's like long.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Yes.
The naming is like, where did they come up with some of this stuff? It's like when you look at the functions, it's like yikes.
Do you really need a character? Do you really need a commandlet that's 70 characters long? I don't think so.
I wish, well, I know it's never going to happen, but I wish they would go back and rewrite the AD on-prem module and fix things in that. But I know that's a lost cause. But, going back to the Azure AD thing, so Align, where I work, is really interesting, because I've worked at manufacturing companies prior, but this company, when I came there, they said, we want nothing on-prem.
Okay.
Everything is in the cloud. We want to and whatever is still on-prem, we are going to try to work as fast as we can to get it out of here, which was really kind of a shock to me. I wasn't used to that. So right now we're doing a lot of identity management, a lot of single sign-on, a lot of PKI and certs. And I will tell you that I am not great at it. I'm lucky that I have a team that's willing to help me along and help me figure out the things that I'm not strong at, because I'm the classic GPO, AD, replication guy,
Yeah.
I mean, I've been doing Azure, but just not where like Azure is the lifeblood of the company. It was always, at my other place, Azure was an add-on to the on-prem, and it was really just to get accounts out to the cloud so that we could do O365 and do MFA and single sign-on, and that was kind of the end of it. But this is a whole nother beast. So I really needed to be pushed into it, because I kept getting intimidated more than anything. And finally, I got somebody to just say, you know what, you're going to do this. And I was like, you sure you want me to do this right now? He's like, yeah, let's do it. And once you do it, it's really not that challenging. It's all new. Everything's a shiny new object. You just have to figure out what each thing means. But it's a lot of identity management. It's a lot of single sign-on stuff. All certificates for me. What else are we focusing on right now? That's really, I'm dealing with a lot of ADFS to Azure AD right now. We're collapsing some domains. We're still dealing with technology debt, so it's the same things that people have dealt with all along, but it's refreshing to see a company that's like, hey man, we want no hardware on-prem.
Right. So with the transition that you're doing, how do the commandlets for Azure AD compare to the stuff you're used to for dealing with on-premises Active Directory? Is it pretty strong? Is it good, or is it a pain to work with?
Well, I think generally speaking, I think the commandlets are good. And that sometimes comes from just people have had more time to write commandlets, so they get better at doing it compared to if you're looking at AD commandlets that were made 6-8 years ago, right? I think the real problem is it seems like, and I don't know the answers why, but Microsoft has like, hey, we're going to do it this way. And then a year later, well, we're going to make this module that's not going to do what that module used to do. But some of the things in that old module still work. And then there's this new module. And then, for 365, you have to do it a different way. So I don't feel that the commandlets are bad, but I feel that the usage between modules is not the same. So it's like you have to figure out how each module works. It really feels like it's different teams that are writing the code.
Okay.
I don't think similarly.
Yeah, it's probably true. Totally different people.
Aha moment for me, I think, with Azure was a lot of how you create and manage your identity in Azure AD, and passing that like authentication between the modules. It's crazy to see it actually work the first time you get a pop-up for a 2FA or something like that. Where you're like, hey, it's actually coming from a PowerShell console. I'm actually getting the two-factor authentication to pop up, and my Azure AD account is up here now. That was kind of crazy for me to see.
Well, so imagine for me being onboarded at a new place, and he's, go here, do this, go here, do that, and every app is already 2FA enabled, single sign-on, and you're like, wow, that really works well when you see it done. But when you're on the other side and trying to figure out how to get there, especially if you're an on-prem guy like I was for so long.
What's going on?
That's pretty amazing.
Who's having an awesome time so far?
So are you guys playing with PowerShell 7?
That is awesome.
Who started up the video there?
Loaded questions, because I know you aren't at work this week.
Did I do something weird?
Who can tell me?
I can hear my Summit video in the background.
Oh, sorry. That would be me.
Totally up to date.
I was like, wow, that's cool.
I wanted to get the link for the notes. Sorry about
Thanks,
that.
Man.
Didn't mean to fit that
cool.
audio to
I
you.
recognize that voice. I was like, hey, I remember him. Yeah.
Do you know my wife will not watch that video? That's like the proudest moment of my career. I'm like, will you watch that? She's like, I'm so nervous for you. And I'm like, it's over. It went well. She's like, I can't watch it. I can't watch it.
This is episode 335 of this podcast. My wife has never listened to one. I don't think my children have ever listened to one other than
you
a
should
few
be
minutes.
like, honey, I'm kind of a big deal.
She's like, yeah, whatever.
So
go pick your clothes up off the floor.
The usual like tech guys in the basement, eh? Like,
if we're being honest here, you guys are blowing me up here, telling me about all this community cred and all the stuff I have. I come home and I'm like, hey, honey, PowerShell.org just asked me to do something with them, and I just get a look. She's like, what are you doing?
And this is relevant to me how? Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, okay, I'll just go back in my room. It's okay.
No, it's funny. That's a good question, actually, John, with the PowerShell 7 stuff. Really, really interesting to see. I've been playing with it just a little bit. That and Windows Terminal are my two things on my list now that I have hopefully a bit of time. I kind of we over here at Chocolatey are kind of crazy sometimes with our schedule. We run around the clock for a lot of stuff. We're pushing out some new projects. So the tough thing with me is trying to make time in my spare time now. With a full-time gig where I'm kind of involved with PowerShell stuff all the time.
Sure.
It's like making that time for the fun stuff afterwards, sort of like the exploring yourself. So the two things is Windows Terminal and PowerShell 7 kind of right now. And this was my experience. And I don't know, Mike, you can talk about this more too, because I found with Core, so PowerShell 6, when that came out, a lot of things were still in the process of working. Like a lot, of course, like, the AD stuff is still one of those outliers. And I'm kind of excited to see there's some stuff coming down the pipe with AD Core. I've heard from people indirectly yet, so I'm not going to say anything on thing, but there is some cool stuff coming for sure. And so sort of the difference I've seen so far in terms of PowerShell 7 is just how much out of the box just works in terms of functions, and on a lot of the commandlets and the stuff that you're used to just works really well in 7. And it's fully, like, pretty much a lot of my friends and sort of folks and fellow contributors in the community are taking their modules and they're trying to see if they're available cross-platform and on the and they going from 5 to 6 Core. I don't know if you know, like from 5.1 to Core, a lot of people, when they were trying to make the compatibility for both of those for their modules, they were finding some challenges there.
Oh, yeah.
With 7, it seems like, yeah, you're familiar with that. So it seems like with 7, Mike, maybe you can speak to this more, but it just seems like it's almost like a drop-in replacement. It's really smooth. It's getting close to that parity between.
I think so. I had an interesting conversation with the guys that I work with. I work on a small team of 4, and they have 7 installed, but they're like, we're not using it in production because they've only used release candidates and dev candidates, and it was, I guess, probably pretty buggy for them. So we just did some articles on, the production release of 7, and the guys were surprised at how well it worked. I've only had one bug. I can't even remember the exact details. It's data coming across the pipeline for AD stuff. I don't remember exactly what it was. A couple times I just run a command and I would look and I'm like, I know I wrote that syntax correctly, trying to pull something from the pipeline. And I went to 5.1, it worked fine. And one of the guys in my group said, oh yeah, that's a known bug. That's the only time I've been hung up on 7. But I am really, really loving the terminal. But the problem now is I started this new company and they gave me a machine that's not new enough to run terminal. I was like, oh, you're kidding me.
Oh, and it's not enough for a build?
Yeah, and I don't want to push my luck too much. I'm only there for 5 weeks. I don't want to build my own machine yet. So I'm like, all right, it doesn't work. I'll stick it out a few more weeks. But yeah, so I kind of got the terminal bug and I was using it for a while, and then I want to use it at work and I can't do it yet. So but I think 7 works. I think it just works, honestly. And so 7 specifically, I just love those error messages. They did a super awesome job with that.
Yeah, I really appreciate that too. I had
actual good errors.
Recently, I had to essentially kind of simulate a domain controller, or simulate the security event log for a domain controller, because we have a event pipeline that we're testing an agent, NXLog for. And we needed to make a change to it in order to get the data in the format that security wanted for their SIM tool or whatever. And so in order to make it work, I had to do a couple of data transformations. And I wanted to make sure that the overhead that incurred would not prevent the events from going as fast as possible. So I essentially I wrote a script to write to the security event log as fast as possible. And, we have those commandlets to write to the event log, but in order to write to the security event log, you've got to make changes to the security to even allow you to do that, which I didn't want to mess with any of that. So the easiest way I could figure out to do it is I just created a dummy account and just changed the description. Because every time I'd change the description, it would create a security event. And so I just created
security events again and again. That's neat.
Yeah, exactly. So all I did was create a loop, and the description, I just had I did 1 to 1,000,000, and just had changed the description to, processing number $underbar, right? So I could just go to the user interface and just look and see where it was in the loop, just by looking at the description of the user account. And So I'm like, oh, cool. I'm going to use PowerShell 7. I'm going to use the for each parallel. And it's going to rock. And so I tried it, and it was fast. And I was playing with, I was tweaking the throttle, trying to figure out, how I could set the throttle to get to the absolute maximum. But it still wasn't fast enough to hit the data that I had from actual domain controllers, because I had one of the guys run a list of, I was okay, and he gave me, these are the domain controllers, and this is for a day, and these are like 15-minute increments, and this is how many security events we got in those time frames. And there was one domain controller, I think it was a PDC emulator, that had an outlier 15-minute period that was, it was, I don't know, 250,000 events or something. And hey,
Nico.
Nico, say hi. You're a celebrity. Everybody's asking about you. Just wave hi.
There he is, the man himself. Yeah, good to see you.
All right, I'll see you later.
And I could not get it to create events fast enough. I even tried running multiple instances of Power. Once I had the throttle and like to get it was tuned pretty well. Then I was spun up, I did different instances of PowerShell, and I was running it all simultaneously, and it still wasn't happening fast enough. So then I went back and then just took the parallel off of there. Boom.
Oh, wow.
It went so much faster just because of the overhead of creating all the run spaces and stuff. Just because it was such a trivial thing that I was doing, that I didn't get any performance benefit from using the parallel, but I was so stoked. I was like, oh man, I've been looking forward to this. I've got a use case where I can use the parallel. And it ended up being faster to not use it. So
I'm kind of afraid of the parallel thing, because most of the time, especially if you're doing AD stuff and I'm pulling lists from domain controllers, one of the things that we talked about in a meeting one night was about how, yeah, parallel can do some great things, but if your source that you're pulling from isn't going to be able to handle, like, let's just say 10x the amount of requests that are coming from it, you don't want to take a box down. So I'm like, maybe I don't want to do parallel right now, so I've chickened down on that command a little bit.
So can you think of a better way to create security events really, really fast? Have you ever needed to do that, Mike?
No, but when you were talking, I was wondering, this feels like the same problem as when you try to query directory file lists with PowerShell, right?
Okay.
And PowerShell sometimes isn't as fast for pulling
it's not as fast as
because it's pulling the objects, right?
Right.
It's got to pull all that extra data when you just want a list of files. So maybe if there's a way you can just create the files and not have to have all the data that comes with PowerShell, maybe that's a better idea.
You can.
Like you're mocking that file?
There's like a .NET class you can use. It's been a long time since I had to do that, but I ran into that problem where I had to pull a directory, like a huge directory, and get information about it. And all I really needed was like the paths or something. I didn't need all the data. And I ended up figuring out a way to do it with .NET that was like tremendously faster than doing it with is that right? Or maybe it was COM.
No, that probably sounds right.
Underlying .NET method sounds right to me, yeah.
But in any event, it was just pulling the data that I needed and not the entire objects. And it was much faster.
Last year I went to PowerShell Saturday in Chattanooga, and I've gone twice, and James and Littlejohn, they do an awesome job with that event, and they usually have something before the actual PowerShell Saturday, like an all-day learning event. And Jeff Hicks did it last year, and he did sort of like an advanced thing. And there was a lot of people there in the community that are well-known in the community. I mean, like some bigger name people. And Jeff was trying to talk about how to do things, and a lot of people were calling out like, oh, that's a instance where you should be using .NET. It's faster. And Jeff was trying to make the case that, if you're reaching out to .NET, that maybe, PowerShell should be fine for what you do for the everyday tasks. When you start to move to .NET, you're moving to more of a programmer background, and you need to probably work more in .NET as a whole rather than just picking one piece of .NET and pulling it into PowerShell. I'm not sure that I 100% agree with them, because like the perfect example is generic list, compared to an array that you just have to keep rebuilding because it can't be expanded. But I kind of see his point. PowerShell is supposed to be easy and fast. Fast meaning fast to write the code, not necessarily fast in the data that comes back. And when you start to commingle and you get into that .NET world, like that is all a mystery to me. I mean, I always count on someone like Stevie or someone to tell me, how would I do this in .NET? And I'm always lost. And I think the point is .NET always is a better way, but when you get that world, it becomes much more of like a structured programming language rather than the forgiving nature that PowerShell is. And it's interesting to see where that line is. There's more and more people moving in that .NET direction because they've become so good at PowerShell. But it's interesting to hear Jeff Hicks kind of advocating against that as your everyday driver, not really using .NET.
Well, I would agree with that, except for me, it's an edge case thing where I have just reached past what I can do with PowerShell.
Yeah, the problem is that performant thing, right?
Yeah.
Like if you want things to be performant to a certain level, your gateway drug is always going to be PowerShell. You're going to start there, but the underlying .NET method often is what you geek out with the guys in Bridge and other places that Joel or somebody will call up and be like, Chris Dent is one of those guys too, where he'll be like, you probably want the underlying .NET method for this specific thing.
Yeah, and 98% of the time, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
For me, right? The performance, what I'm doing is plenty fast enough. But every once in a while, I'm doing something against so many machines or whatever the situation is. It just has to handle so much data so fast that I just find benefits to exploring beyond PowerShell. And of course, PowerShell lets you bring that other stuff in. So, you've got your script that's pretty straightforward, but then, you may end up with a couple lines of code that somebody who comes along after you is going to take a look at that code, or you're going to, 3 years, you're going to go back and look at that code and you're like, okay, what does that do? And then you got to go look up the, dot, look it up in MSDN and be like, oh, okay, that's what that does.
Well, I mean, you're definitely right on the mark, but it always comes down to the same thing. Go back 10 years ago, PowerShell has gotten better, right? We're on version 7, but where were we 10 years ago? Nobody, well, maybe not nobody, but most people did not have environments with this many nodes or these many data points to pull from, or this huge sets of data to kind of correlate from. So now you are hitting the performance limits of things like PowerShell because no one's ever had to deal with these sort of scale issues before, at least not the everyday admins.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great point. Is like, I think what we forget about in the PowerShell community a lot is we're sort of victims of our own success, right? We're getting into the space of DevOps and automation to the extent that, like, everything is built into Azure and AWS, and we have the modules available to us. So it's very much like become this sort of I like to call it a sort of a de facto language of automation, but plenty of people will disagree with me there. I don't want to get a bunch of Python devs angry here, but generally, like with that, I think what happens is you get to a level of like a tipping point almost with any sort of community where you start getting into the areas where people want to edge cases and they want to be more performant, and so I think it's sort of like, how they say when you grow and you increase yourself as a person, sort of the quality, it's not the quality of your life, it's kind of the quality of your problems that increases. So now we've got those like $1 million quality problems with PowerShell, where it's like now we're trying to be in spaces where we're managing like millions of nodes in cloud infrastructure, and suddenly we need that performance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that.
Yeah, if you think about it, I've been a sysadmin for better than 15 years, but again, Windows admin on-prem, and go back 10 plus years, you were either a GUI admin or you knew VB, right? That was kind of it. Now you talk to guys and they're like, well, I know PowerShell, but I want to learn Python, or I'm going to do it in Rust, and I know .NET, and I want to do these things. And it is interesting to see how much of a programming nature that an admin job has taken on, learning these languages. And it's interesting for me to work with guys that are on the tail ends of their career. They're struggling with making these transitions.
Yeah, I think that's something to call you out a little bit, Mike. I think with your perspective, and I know I've gotten in trouble before for specifically calling out your age before, but I think one of the cool things about it, though, really I find this most refreshing is like meeting you first in the community, also like your willingness to learn new things, right? As you advance in your career, we're neither of us are spring chickens in our career in IT, but generally, like I think it's that ability to be like, okay, you know, I have colleagues close to my age who in previous jobs and other places where they're not really looking, that they feel like they're in the tail end of their career and they kind of want to settle in and focus on that one niche that they have. And I think we've always been sort of hungry a little bit, right? In your perspective, I've seen you always try new things and check stuff out and be pretty humble in that whole process. You undersell yourself a lot, man. Like I having you show up and chat and stuff. I remember one of the first conversations we had, I was talking to you about how you know, I look up to you in the PowerShell community as one of those guys, and you were sort of blown away by it a little bit and surprised. And I'm like, why would you be? You're awesome. So yeah.
I guess a lot has happened to me in a short amount of time, so it's still a little hard to grasp. And I guess maybe it's just being humble because I worked a long time just being a regular guy and trying to get. I've always been a guy that's been recognized as someone as sort of a tech leader in my group or whatever. But the community's completely different when you get to talk with other people and share stuff, and just I think it comes down to this: you hang around with a certain group of people. There's always people that are sort of pushing those boundaries. Maybe for me, if I hung around with a certain group of people, they would say that I'm pushing the boundaries, but I hang around with some people and I see them pushing the boundaries. So you look up to them, you compare yourself to them, you say, wow, I still got a lot to learn. But, you know, it's a continual learning path for everybody. So I just am interested. It's just very interesting to me to do this stuff. I guess the easiest way to say is I'm a continual learner. So I'm interested. Oh, PowerShell 7 came out. Let's see what's going on there. It's not like, I've done this already. I just don't care. And I've heard that from admins. And I don't think you can sort of get people out of that mentality easily once they've kind of gotten to that point. So I turned 50 this year, and that does not roll off the tongue very easily. But I'm trying to just stay current and hang with these young guys that are doing all these amazing things. It's not easy. I'm telling you, it's hard for me to keep up, but I try. I do the best I can.
We're doing a great job, just for the record. Yeah, you're hanging. I think this is that genuine curiosity, Mike. I think we all kind of have it, right? We're tweakers. We like to play with things. That's kind of where we got in this PowerShell in the beginning, right? Johnny, would you agree?
Absolutely. And I think if you don't have that mindset, you're probably not going to be really happy in your career in IT. Unless you are, you know, maybe you're a COBOL programmer and, you know, you're just keeping those last systems going or something, and where you don't have to learn the new stuff. It makes me think of Jeffrey Snover, who talks about his friend who is in lumber. And he jokes about how it's been a long time since they've invented a new tree. But
that's a great one.
With us, you know, the rate of change, of course, is increasing, and there's always new things to learn, and which is, you know, why I love what I do, and probably why you guys love what you do too, because you're always learning something new. It's always interesting. And to me, when I'm in the day-to-day, it doesn't really hit me the way it does if I think back to what I was doing, you know, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And you think about how many things have changed since then. But when you're in it, you know, you're just in it. You're just learning new stuff a little bit at a time. And I think some people get freaked out because they feel like they have to learn, you know, new technologies all at once. And that's not usually how it is. If so, it's like one new aspect that you have to learn. And then once you learn that aspect, then there's another aspect and another aspect. And you just kind of build up your knowledge. It's like, you know, going up a hill or something. You don't have to, you know, I don't know, throw up a grappling hook and climb it hand over hand. You can just go up the hill.
But it is amazing when you look back over progression. Because like you said, when you do it every day, you don't necessarily notice things you've accomplished. until you get to some point where you have a comparison. And I was thinking the other day, like a manager will come to me and say, like, we need to solve X problem. I'm like, oh yeah, come on, give it to me. I'd love to write up something to do that. And I remember 8-9 years ago, I'd be like, we're going to use this guy's homegrown script. Let's get an off-the-shelf product to do that. And it's so funny how I'm like, oh, we're really going to go buy a product now? Come on, I can write that. So it is interesting to see how things have changed and those progressions happen. I never really thought about it until I was put in those situations. But I mean, for me, I will say PowerShell has been a second coming of a career. I had thought about getting out of the field completely. When I first started dabbling in PowerShell, right before that, I was like, man, I'm just kind of burnt. I'm bored. So it was kind of a refresher, and it's been a pretty cool run since then. My only regret is I wish I maybe would have started at the command line way earlier in my career than I did. But you know, you can't change what has happened. You just got to deal with what you have today. So to Adil's point, I'm just trying to take advantage of whatever comes my way at this point and make the most of it, and not necessarily like hoard all the toys for myself, but just trying to make connections and see where I can go and try new things I never thought that I'd be exposed to. So that's sort of how I kind of approach every day. And someone says, hey, you want to do this? And honestly, the answer is usually like, yeah, that sounds cool. Let's give it a shot.
Well, if you're thinking about if you had started earlier and you're thinking back to like VB script, you're not missing anything, man.
I know I'm not missing anything.
Fair point. But, Doc was talking about that a bunch. He had to work in VB back in the day, and he's like, wow, yeah, you're not, different world.
I remember for the first couple years of PowerShell, its existence, you could tell the people who knew VB script by looking at their PowerShell code.
Their variable names and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Just the way they structured it, you're like, you're writing VB script in PowerShell. That's there's better ways to do that.
I still sort of see that now. It's funny because the other end of that is I see a lot of you can tell from code now when I look at modules who's a C# developer as well on the other end of that, because you know how they're like used to have that sort of certain declarative syntax for certain things. They're like, oh, okay, yeah, I see where you're coming from. The variable names too, kind of tip it off a bit. You're like, yeah, you're a C# guy. Cool.
Or you look at somebody's PowerShell script and they have a main function. And
yeah, definitely. No, this is really interesting, though. You guys brought up an interesting point I kind of want to touch on and get both your input on specifically, which is the whole idea of, Ryan Yates is a big one in our community for this, talking about the mental health aspect of tech, right? We work in an interesting industry where burnout is a very real thing. And it's sort of, we get a lot of technology thrown at us all the time. And so Ryan's been a great advocate for this. He has a talk last year at Ignite and stuff for it too, that we should definitely call out at some point. But part of that is the whole, I find I struggle with this too with some of my colleagues, my old previous colleagues, not so much now over here at Chocolatey. We're pretty like doing fun things all the time. But one of the challenges you find is like people get overwhelmed really easily, colleagues of ours in tech, where they're sort of like, they feel like they need to keep up with the new and shiny all the time, right? And I think like I just curious to see what y'all's strategies are around it, because for me, very much so, like it's not necessarily the fact that I know I can solve every problem out there. I just come into it with a different approach of troubleshooting and looking at challenges where it's like I feel I have the confidence to learn that up as I need it, that technology up as I need it. So it's really just more the confidence of being able to tackle it that you come into without like thinking, okay, I don't need to know everything and all the ins and outs of this specific module or this specific technology, but I'm comfortable if given the time, I know I can get up to speed with this. I have enough experience in my career to do so. So curious to see how you guys handle that too, with the whole burden of tech debt that's constantly on you with all the tech coming out.
Well, I will say, I don't always, I wouldn't say, I'm not in 100% agreement with where you are with that, because I sympathize for the guys that are trying to get in the PowerShell game or the scripting game a little later than, let's say, someone like Jonathan who's been doing it for a long time and has a history between all the versions of PowerShell. I interviewed twice in the last year, and I mean, I would not want to be in the job market now without having some knowledge of PowerShell, especially in an AD position. So the problem there is that if you are not up to speed, there's a lot of pressure on you in order to learn so that you can sort of keep working at what you do, or maybe excel up to the next level. Because I feel like there's a lot of guys now that are sort of like green screen terminal operators, where everybody knows someone who works on an AS400, but nobody ever wants to be the guy that has to go look for a job in the AS400 field, because there's like 6 choices available always at the most, right? So if you're not pushing yourself forward, you're really eliminating choices for yourself in the field. So that being said, if you are not up to speed, man, there's some pressure on guys, because I can tell you that it was a big part of my interview process at both jobs. Not just like, do you know get AD user, but like, have you automated? Have you written scripts? Have you done things to eliminate work, let's say, you know? So I can feel the pressure, and I think I know some stuff. I couldn't imagine a guy who's just starting out, and my user group deals with people all the time that are like, hey man, I'm just trying to get my feet wet with PowerShell. And I'm like, come on in. The water's warm over here. We'll be happy to help you. But at the same token, man, if you got a job and you don't like that job and you want to go somewhere else and you're not that strong, it's hard to stand out in the market these days. So that puts pressure on people. How do you deal with that? I don't know. I mean, I've just committed to sort of try to learn something every week. Now, I will say that I was getting a little down at my meetings, even when I was a leader, because there was a couple of guys that were doing really interesting stuff. And I'm like, how do you guys know all this stuff? I don't get the opportunity to do this stuff at work. And one of the really greatest things I've ever had said to me was from Jonathan Moss, who actually was the guy who did the talk at my group tonight. He's like, I was you at my last job. Now you know what you want in your next job, because you want that opportunity to do that. And I was like, oh, wow, I never thought of it that way. He's like, I was in the exact same spot as you. I was frustrated. I couldn't figure out how I was going to learn this stuff because I was getting no opportunities at work. I wanted to do it, but work had no interest in doing it. And he just changed what he was looking for when he looked for his job, his next position, so that he had those opportunities. And until someone said that to me, I was just super intimidating, because I just didn't realize maybe I need to think about better places to work, not just learn more stuff.
That's a really good point. I didn't even think about it that way. Thanks, Mike, for bringing that up, because I think that's kind of how I feel about being over here with Chocolatey. This was that gig for me as well, where I was sort of like always the guy on the outside, not getting to play with a bunch of stuff. So public sector in Vancouver, and if you're familiar at all with Canadian laws, they're very restricted about what you can use in terms of public cloud resources. Everything needs to be hosted in Canada for BC FIPA laws. So I never got to play with the new and shiny stuff a lot. And I think being over here at my next gig, like exactly like Jonathan Moss was saying, like it's that point where you're like, whoa, okay. It's kind of like what Don always says, right? With the, your job is your employer's responsibility, but your career is your own responsibility. And sort of taking that ownership to be like, okay, I'm in charge of my career. I got to put the time in myself, or I got to look for my next gig to sort of get my hands dirty more so in tech. That's a really interesting perspective, John. What do you think about like the whole thing with mental health and tech and technical debt and all this stuff and lifetime learning?
If I think about people who may struggle with the feeling that they always have to know everything, that they have to be on top of every technology, the way that I have handled that, I listen to a lot of tech podcasts. And the reason I do that isn't always because it's tech that I'm using, but because it's tech that's in my field. It's stuff that I at least want to have a passing familiarity with. And I have learned enough stuff in my career, and I have seen enough change that I know if I need to learn something, I can. Right? Google's always there.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You don't have to have all the facts in your head to know something, right? If you have an entry point into that subject, you can learn it, right? Because the way learning works, right, the way your memories work in your brain is the way to understand something is to relate it to something else. So the more you know, literally, the more you can learn. because you have more associations that you can make from your experience to integrate the new knowledge. So when I think about that, the mental hurdle that I see for people, just people that I work with, is people are afraid to say, I don't know. And I'm not afraid to do that anymore. I'll do it in a meeting with 150 people. Somebody use an acronym I don't understand. I'll be like, I don't understand what that means. And I'm not afraid to do that. And I think if you can get past that, and nobody expects you to know everything.
But we
Nobody
think
knows
that
everything.
We think that everybody expects us to know things.
We think everybody else knows everything.
It's that imposter syndrome again.
Guess what? They don't. Guess what? Jeffrey Snover, Jason Helmick, they Google stuff. You know that?
Yeah.
Bruce Payette, he looks stuff up. Nobody knows everything cold, okay? So for people who have that mindset that everybody knows more than me, it's probably not true. And even if it is, you already know and you already have enough experience in your career to learn, right? You went to college. One of the things you learn in college, hopefully, is how to learn, right? You're learning how to research. So I think one way to get past that is to, first of all, realize that the people that you're talking to, they don't know everything, right? People use Google. It's okay. You use Google. It's okay. You don't have to have every commandlet in PowerShell memorized to say, I know how to use PowerShell, right? You don't. Nobody does. It's not necessary. So I think that some people get hung up on things like that. You know, oh my gosh, I need to learn about containers. I have no idea what a container is. Well, go watch a YouTube video that somebody will do a 15-minute overview of containers and, you know, draw a little diagram for you. And then you'll have a conceptual understanding based on your experience of, okay, well, I can kind of think of a container, you know, it's a little bit like a virtual machine, right? I use virtual machines. I understand how that works. And maybe I can think of, well, a virtual machine at some level is just the operating system is being fooled by the hardware. So the operating system thinks it's running on hardware that's a, you know, specific hardware, but that's really virtualized. And a container is kind of the same thing, only the operating system is what's virtualized. So if you can make those connections based on your own knowledge, then you're going to be fine. And if you need to get into the weeds, then that's where you study and get into the weeds. But for me, I think it's important to have at least some kind of understanding of the technologies, at least in your area and the areas that deal with your area, depending on, you know, what your role is. And as far as that anxiety, you know, I think part of it is understanding that it's okay that you don't know everything and just trying to get past it. And I understand that it's difficult for people, especially like if you're the least experienced guy on your team, right? And everybody knows more than you, and they've all been there 3 years, and it's your first week.
I gotta say though, on that note, John, like that's kind of how I feel sometimes over at Chocolatey, and
Sure.
I used to be really scared of that, and now it's the most exciting thing. Mark Krause gave me that advice when I moved over specifically, who's like done so much great work over at LinkedIn, but like also, you know, IRM, Invoke Rest Method, and Web Request. He's the guy.
Oh yeah.
A fellow PowerScripting guy as well. But he gave me that advice of saying, you know, it's like he said Jeffrey Snover told him to once that it's sort of like that. It's like you talk about elevator job. This is like an escalator job. You're climbing up really quickly, and it's really exciting to be the least experienced guy in the room. You got to be excited about it because that means you got so much to learn here. If you are the least experienced guy in the room, you maybe need to look for your next gig.
And another mental thing that I think helps is some people feel intimidated and a little antagonistic if the guy next to me knows more than I do. If you can shift that mindset to, wow, there's a lot I can learn from that guy, and start paying attention to what you can learn, I think that's a more healthy outlook than, and if you're thinking to yourself, well, I need to get to his level, and you're thinking it as almost like a competition between you and your coworkers, instead of thinking at it is so awesome that I am in this team with these people who are more experienced than me, because I'm going to learn so much. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I don't know. It's hard for me to speak about, because that's not something that I have had massive struggles with in my life. So I don't know the best mental models to deal with that. But I can tell you, those are the kind of things that I try and do for myself, and I try and encourage other people to do, just, based on my experience. So
and shift that mindset, like you're saying.
Yeah,
right?
to shift the mindset. I think that's critical. And I think that, I know that, sometimes we talk about having a growth mindset, right? And that's kind of along those lines in your career and in your knowledge, right? You haven't reached the point where you're not going to learn anything more. Mm-hmm. Okay?
You never really do.
You're not there. Trust me. You can learn something new. I'm 47. I started learning how to play the cello this year. I've never played a musical instrument. Okay?
That's awesome.
You can do
That's
it.
amazing.
Right? Yeah. You can do it.
Yeah. So I will say this specifically with Mike, and you can agree. I'll let you talk about this more, Mike. But from my perspective, I think, would you say that because we're probably guys who've been in those different types of rooms before, for sure. We're being more of the smarter guy, but then also the having a lot of smarter guys around us. So would you say that the PowerShell community is kind of like a secret weapon that way in terms of leveling up your career?
For sure. But that's something I wanted to talk about, because Corbob was writing in the chat about how Scott Hanselman says that's why he blogs, and I wanted to talk a little bit about blogging, because we're talking as friends here, and some of the guys in the chat are friends that we talk with, but there's going to be some people that listen to this that maybe just know our names or whatever from the community, but are just regular everyday people. And I hear a lot about blogging, writing, learning. I started my blog with basically writing a note to myself. I used to keep a lot of notes in OneNote and Evernote, and I was like, what are you doing? You probably should give some of this back to some person who's looking for some stuff. So I said, why don't I just put this on a blog post? And the blog posts were written for me, so I could go and search. Josh said in the chat that he's looked up some issues, and he's found his own articles that he felt really dumb when he didn't know the answer because he wrote the article. But the truth is, I wrote the articles sometimes so I could remember for myself for the future. And you get better at writing as you do it more and more. But a lot of those articles that I've written, you read something and you go, wow, that dude really knows what he's doing. The truth is, that article, which took you 8 minutes to read, took me 3.5 weeks to write. And I put together every example that I could think of, and you don't see the 57 mistakes that I wrote that I was trying to struggle with syntax, right? So people take these blog posts and they think that we're all experts. But I mean, honestly, my last job, when I started blogging a lot, I was telling my coworkers, I'm like, look, there's a post that's going to come out tomorrow that really should be hey, this is a problem I just solved at work, but I can't put that as the title as a post. Because that's really what it was. It was I figured out a problem and I would just write it down. So I'm saying this because I hear from a lot of guys, girls, that I don't know if I could blog. I don't know if I could write. I don't know if I could share anything with this community. You don't have to be super pro expert writer, or even super proficient technical level. There's nothing wrong with writing something, as long as you're not writing something that's inherently wrong, right? You just didn't do the time to put the research in to learn how something works. But there's nothing wrong. I mean, I wrote an article that got published, and I had a guy, Pat Richard, that said, hey man, good article, but did you know line 37, you could do this instead? And I was like, that is awesome, but I feel like a jerk because I just published an article with some old school PowerShell 2 version how to solve a problem in PowerShell 5, but that it doesn't have to be perfect. We don't have to know it all. You don't have to be an expert on every single thing. You're really just sharing some knowledge to help someone else who's struggling, trying to figure out the same thing that you may have figured out already. So I kind of wanted to bring that up because maybe someone will hear this in their car or something like that and be like, you know what, maybe I can write an article.
And here's a secret. Nobody's going to read the whole blog post anyway.
Unless you write really short ones.
It would be very rare that somebody would actually do that. They're looking for a solution to their problem, right? They're going to look for your code that has the example that they need that they're going to go run off and use in their script, right? So
right.
Don't get so hung up on your prose, okay?
Pays to not be so precious about it, for sure.
Yeah.
It's a big part of that, right? Like I think we do get around that, and we worry about it a lot when we're trying to post something or put something out in the community, and it's like having that change to say, okay, wait a minute, it's like life itself. It's sort of such an iterative process. Revisions are very much a part of it, and it's okay. If somebody like calling out that problem, Mike, that's a great opportunity for you to plug him in your edit of that script, of that article, right? And you probably did. And you said, hey, by the way, he showed me a different way to do this.
Now, the difference is, though, if you are explaining how something works. If you're just providing an example of how to do something in PowerShell, people are probably not going to read your whole blog post, right?
Agree.
But if you're explaining how something works, that's where people are probably going to take the time because they're trying to understand the concept, right? They're not looking for how do I use this .NET thing in PowerShell to make this search faster, right? They're just going to look at the code and say, oh, okay, if this is the .NET method, okay, all right, fine. And they're going to use that. They're not going to read all the text. But if you are explaining how a technology works or why something is, then I think it's more appropriate to focus more on your prose because then that's where people really are probably going to read the whole thing. At least that's what I do.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
we're
I think
talking about like Kevin Marquette and PowerShell Explained, right? That's pretty direct on if you're talking about places where we've all looked up that article so many times to like wrap our head around arrays and hash tables or something. Like he's been so great, Kevin, in the community. Marquette, I have to call him out. Like PowerShell Explained is one of those blogs where it's like you keep going back to like nuggets.
Yeah, what is that 14th way to create a custom object in PowerShell? What's that way I did that one time? That was really cool. Let me search for that. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, here it is. Copy paste.
I'm sure Kevin is helping himself in that process too, right? He's thanking future Kevin. Like future Kevin is thanking him for whatever he's doing. Mike, you were saying?
I don't know. I think Kevin is a little bit of like super genius. I mean, I've sat through some sessions with him at Summit, and I'm like, what is this person talking about? And he's already absorbed it, and he's moved on to the next thing. And I'm like, he just has a really great ability to pick up new things and understand them very quickly. And even like, so last year I presented at the Summit, which was amazing, right? First of all, I can't believe that those suckers actually approved my request to talk, and I can't believe I did it, and it worked, right? Right, but so they did, all right? And I'm talking to Kevin, and I'm like, yeah, I submitted 2. They picked 1. He's like, yeah, I submitted 11. And I'm like, 11? Where do you, I don't have 11 ideas for the next 10 summits.
Yeah, that's like Thomas Rainer submits 9, I think, or 10 every time, right? Like, I don't know how they so prolific. Like,
I think part of it is, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but they sort of don't care. They just talk about a topic that they know about. And it doesn't even have to be super, like some of Thomas's topics, you're like, wow, that was awesome. But I would never think to talk about that. Like I know you've seen a bunch of his talks.
Yeah.
Like he did one on risk. Like,
yeah.
who the hell would talk about risk, right? But it, like when you hear them, they're so good. But like we probably talk ourselves out of many good topics is what I guess what I'm trying to say.
I'm gonna give away a little bit of that secret there because like I think I talked to Thomas, we're pretty close, and I will say like a lot of his topics you see out there. Here's a secret, folks. He hasn't even written it yet. You know, he's just put out the proposal for those topics, and that forces him to learn that technology, and that really comes from that confidence and experience, right? He knows that he can get learned up and up to speed and be able to present a topic in a short period of time, and he really shows up and he does the work and he puts the time in. He practices. He rehearses all of his individual talks, and even records like rehearsed versions of it in case something goes wrong and the VMs don't work. He's got all the backups there, so he comes into it with that confidence. But when he submits a lot of those topics, spoiler, I don't think he actually has that talk prepared, right? Like he doesn't, maybe not even knows that technology that well at that time, but he commits to getting learned up on it. So that's like, if you're ever hesitating from the community, if we could put that message out to folks, it's like a lot of us who submit those talks don't know everything about it right then. We're submitting to learn up and to give that talk as well.
Well, we talk about that in my user group a lot because I would kind of say, so I don't do a lot of speaking. I did one at the summit, and I've done a couple of Saturday things here and there. But generally speaking, I've probably only done like 7-8 presentations, like formal stuff, right? So I wouldn't say I'm like super awesome at it, but I'm not afraid to do it. But like most of the times I'm like, I think I want to talk about that. If you give me 2 months, I'll probably figure out enough to have 40 minutes worth. But I honestly don't know if I can do it sometimes. I just kind of throw it out there. Like I got some things I want to do for James Petty's PowerShell Saturday, and I'm like it's just an idea. And I'm like, I kind of got that Thomas sort of attitude. Like, yeah, I know I could figure it out if I just knuckle down and do it.
I really like, John, what you were talking about with Ryan in the chat there, where it's like PDD, presentation driven development. I love that idea. That's a part of what we do.
But the people that wait until they're like super expert to talk about a topic, those are boring presentations because it's not exciting to you anymore. I mean, when you get so good at something that you could talk about it without even having to think about it, you've probably done it a million times. It's not something that's new and interesting and for you. I mean, that's what I was starting to say with the user group. Like we coach people who we think have good material and would be a good person to talk. And we hear a lot like, I don't think I could do it. And we're like, look, you have a story there. Just fill in a couple of the gaps. And trust me, if you just tell that story, there's going to be 3 other people that are going to go, oh my God, I have that same problem. Or I'm struggling with this type of thing as well. And you helped me with the problem. So sometimes you just got to push yourself or push someone else a little bit over the edge to say, you can do it. Trust me. You don't have to know all of it before you say you can speak.
And that's like Chris. I'll call out Chris Gardner for a second there, because he definitely did this with me when I was submitting my talk for Summit for this year. He has a funny way of putting it, because he's sort of like, he's not precious about this stuff at all, but also in terms of a good nudge, he's like, just shut up and submit it. Just go ahead. Just go ahead and do it. Like, you know enough. Go do it. Get out there, right? And he really gave me like when Chris said that, and a lot of the guys in the community, like Stevie and Thomas, all these other people, super encouraging. I mean, the great thing about Summit and a lot of this stuff with PowerShell community is, like, I don't know if you guys will agree, but I really feel like anytime you're in a room with people in the PowerShell community, everybody wants you to win. Everybody is there to see you win. So I really get that feeling that people are there listening and kind of want you to achieve your best. So I think that's kind of like, at some point, John, we're gonna have to plug BridgeConf in this talk, because that's the big thing that we're doing recently. We're like sort of missing out with Summit. But yeah, that's the one thing that Thomas Rayner and Corey Knox and I are sort of plugging. But yeah, again, with that sort of like shut up and submit it, that was one of those events, right, where BridgeConf is literally a bunch of us getting together and saying, hey, let's do a Twitch stream and have a call for proposals and just have an impromptu PowerShell conference based on a bunch of people who are in Bridge all the time in PowerShell and Discord, Slack, in chat. It's just like that's the Bridge, that's the channel we all hung out in and met each other in. So we created BridgeConf just out of that sort of thing. And we put out a call for proposals. We got tons of proposals. And now on April 30th, right around the time that we'd normally be missing all our friends and folks in Summit, we're sort of saying, hey, let's get an impromptu conference together and just do it all virtual and just power the community. No sponsors, no nothing there. We're just sort of getting all the people together for that.
So where can people find out more about that so that they can be involved and participate when the day comes?
That's a great point. So I'm going to throw that in there in the chat as well, but it's just twitch.tv/BridgeConf.
You may need to put it in the streaming channel in Slack, because for some reason YouTube doesn't like the posted links.
No problem. So I'll just stick it in here. The cool thing about this was it's sort of like when we're talking about it, everybody has their own ideas. And I know, Mike, your group with the ways that you guys stream stuff and all these different teams have, like, Zoom, which we use very much at work, and like, Skype and Teams and all the different ways to host these different conferences. I know a lot of the MVP summits happened this year with Teams, right? And we were kind of looking for a little bit of a way to deconstruct that this time, where we're like, okay, a lot of us do the PowerShell Live stuff and streaming on Twitch, which is sort of more of an organic process, and you sort of like, it's like watch me code, watch me fail a little bit, but come along for the ride, right? So it's sort of no pressure. People can log into that stream whenever they want throughout the day. So that was kind of the impetus behind it, was we wanted to keep it as a Twitch channel so that people can tune out throughout the day and just be like, hey, I'm going to catch this talk or that talk by a friend of mine or a colleague in the PowerShell community. But I'm super excited about, because we're going to announce we got our call for proposals closed, and we had to review, and those speakers, yeah, there's going to see some heavy hitters there. So we've got some really good submissions. So I'm super excited about it. So
that's very cool.
Yeah. I know it's crazy when you just put an event out there, and it's like people literally had less than a week to respond with calls for proposals, and they showed up. The community showed up because we're all missing Summit, and we want something to put our ideas against. And it's going to be really exciting to see, for everything to come together so quickly. And when we announced that, it's really tough too, because when you're on the other side of it as hosting this piece, I'm realizing very quickly, again, I'm putting myself in a position that I have no experience with and learning on the job. But a lot of that is like, yeah, you learn as you go. And just seeing the submissions, I'm like, wow, we have to decide on this now? We have to turn people down? So we're working on to see if we can use them in user group talks and stuff like that too, and have individual events after the fact. But it's a really great opportunity. Like this is very much like with I don't know if you guys agree, but with the whole thing with COVID-19 and coronavirus and the way that this pandemic has changed everything, you just kind of have to pivot really quick. You have to look at a different way to do things. And I think the amount of the plethora of virtual stuff out there, the amount of people, like we have 2 talks tonight, right? That Mike's supposed to be attending both of them. And that's typically like a lot of nights. People have a lot of things going on. And I think that's humanity sort of evolves, right? We sort of have to find new ways to do what we need to do. So it's pretty cool.
Sure is. Mm-hmm. So Mike, you want to plug your user group or whatever you want to plug?
Yeah. So I'm gonna hit, give me 2 minutes here. So Research Triangle PowerShell user group. I am super excited. Next month, we have Don Jones doing his summit keynote speech for our group.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Yeah, we're super excited about that. And I am pretty confident that we usually have about 50 people join the group every month. We're probably going to cross 2,000 members next month. So I'm so psyched about that. You can find out from rtpsug.com, or you can find us on Meetup, or you can tweet at me or my co-lead Phil or Kevin. If you're on Twitter, you kind of can't miss me. So there's that. I'm also doing some cool stuff with PowerShell.org. We didn't get a chance to talk about it, but I do want to let people know that, who knows, by the time this comes out, maybe it's done already, but I am working on putting more into community heroes. We're going to do community heroes as a regular thing, and we're going to make it a community event. It's not going to be like the MVP award where you kind of don't know how things happen. And to give you guys a little bit of a foreshadow, we're going to allow people to nominate people. We'll vet some names so that, like if you put in, your grandmother, she doesn't deserve to be on the list, obviously, but we'll come up with a valid list of names. And then the previous community heroes are going to pick this year's community heroes.
Oh,
and we're
okay.
going to do that. We're going to probably do that every 6 months at each summit. PowerShell Summit and Automation Summit, and we'll have some cool things to give people who win the awards, and we're going to try to do it for different categories. So it's not just people who write great code. We're going to do it for people who advocate in the community, who are educators. So we're trying to do a lot of stuff with that, and I'm working with Jeff Hicks. We're trying to do more of the scripting game stuff.
Okay.
So lots of cool stuff in the future. And I really would like to let people know, if you're interested in user groups, please talk to me. James and I are trying to offer things to help user groups grow. We have tools that you guys can get if you are struggling for a remote account like Teams or something like that. We can help out with trying to get you speakers. help you get some publicity to get people to come to your local group. So make sure you reach out to James Petty or myself if you're interested in doing more user group stuff. We'd love to help the community grow. So research Triangle PowerShell user group, PowerShell.org. That's kind of where I'm at right now, and I'd love to help anybody who needs any help with stuff.
Fantastic.
It's tough to summarize for you, Mike. There's so many things that you're involved in. I would say honestly, like if somebody hasn't already, go follow Mike on. This is great timing. Go follow Mike on Twitter, Mike Kanakos. Honestly, like if you follow him on Twitter, you'll get the details for all the different things he does. So yourself and James put out a lot of stuff there. So I think it's a good place to find both of you, right? Like specifically you, Mike. Yeah.
Thanks, man. Thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, I hope people don't get tired of looking at my tweets.
Never, sir. Never. Yeah, so go follow Mike on Twitter.
So what else do you want to talk about? Your turn, Adele.
Oh, dude, that's a dangerous thing to give me, John, because I tend to not shut up about stuff. It's funny.
What do you want to plug? Let me narrow it down to. Is there anything you want to plug before I ask you the final question?
Ooh, yeah. I would say BridgeConf, twitch.tv/BridgeConf is the big one.
Okay.
So the conference is coming on April 30th. That's the big place for us. I'm on Twitter as Adilio, Adilio, and Adilio on PowerShell chat and Slack and everything. Feel free to DM me with random things too, maybe just in the community or if you're trying to get started, happy to help. But it's that's sort of the normal places you find me, and you can't miss me. If you follow me on Twitter or other places like that, I'll show up in random spots, and maybe sometimes you'll see a sticker here and there on a laptop that I made somewhere. So it's one of my favorite geeky things to do. But yeah.
And I will tell you, he's very approachable. For example, I pinged him literally 10 minutes before we started, and I'm like, hey, can you come on and co-host with me? He was like, oh, yeah, sure, no problem. Hopped right on.
Yeah, let me quickly get this together. You don't know the mad dash I had on my end to be like, I got to get Skype up and running. Yeah, so it's been really cool. But yeah, twitch.tv/BridgeConf. Find me online as Delio on PowerShell Slack. Show up to the PowerShell Slack and Discord. Honestly, guys, it's a great community and it's so much fun. And we hang out in Bridge a lot and just, shoot the breeze. So it's a great place to be. Nice people.
I've noticed that on the PowerShell Slack, maybe because of the coronavirus, that there must be a lot more traffic because stuff in other channels disappears so fast. Right. Yeah. There's a limit on the number of messages that we can have in Slack. And
if I could recommend one thing about that, and I'll say this and I know I'll be divisive in this, but and Mike knows what I'm going to say already. Log into Discord and create a Discord account, because the Discord history is way longer. I've never found stuff I can't find in Discord. So that's where I like to be in both. I'm on the Slack side and the Discord, but I like to keep Discord there specifically for the search. I spend more time on that side, but for folks on the Slack side, like John that pinged me every once in a while, I do need to hop over there and say hello to. Yeah.
Yeah, I may try that. The last time I looked at Discord, I looked at the UI and went, oh, gross. And
I said the same thing. I said the same thing when I started with
made for gamers. Yeah.
I said the same thing when I started with Discord, but you know what? It's just easy to use, and I just said, I'll go with it. And now I kind of like the UI. Okay.
I just need to shut up and switch.
Dude, you should do it. Hey, John, I don't see you. I've heard all the ones of PowerScripting, one of my favorite podcasts, of course, going forward. But I never hear people ask you, what do you want to plug, John? Do you have stuff to plug yourself? I'm really curious. No. PowerScripting is the big one.
Yeah, that's the main one. I don't have any speaking engagements or anything.
I do notice over the last year or so that you were playing with the Ansible stuff a little more, talk about something. Yeah, yes. Yeah, that you're learning later. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I'm looking forward to is, I'm going to forget his name.
Josh Duffney?
Josh. Yeah, Josh was on, a few months ago, and he's working on an Ansible book that I'm very interested in. We talked a little bit about
Ansible, right?
Yeah, we talked about Ansible when he was on, but it's a technology that I've been using to do my configuration management to handle my servers for my orchestration engine that I'm the SME for. So it's very cool. I love it. It's crazy.
Once you get it, it's a big thing, right? I did it at my previous job, and over here being on the other side of it and actually having a partnership with Ansible, it's been a crazy the group of folks over there, and they show up in chat too. Like Jordan Boreen, one of the authors of a lot of the Windows modules on Ansible itself. He shows up every day. I see him on chat. He logs in from Brisbane, Australia, and he's
that's good. The Windows support is so good.
Yeah,
it's so good. It just works.
It just works. Yeah.
You look at the documentation, and you're like, no. It can't be that simple. And you fill out your little piece of YAML, and bam, it just works. Yeah. You don't have to fight with it. You don't have to.
I will say this, could I be remiss if I didn't mention it? We have a lot of folks in our PowerShell community who are part of the other big teams. So this was going to be my talk at Summit this year, was configuration managers, but specifically the big three sort of that I hear a lot about is Puppet, Chef, and Ansible. Mm-hmm. And we have some great Puppet folks in our PowerShell community here. Mike Lombardi, Glenn Sardi, and these guys, and they've been invaluable. And there's very much pros and cons to each system, right? I think it's great. Ansible is one of those great technologies for an agentless infrastructure. But as soon as you're scaling across hundreds and thousands of nodes where you want stuff to kick off on that end, I think something like a Puppet where you have built in that'll do all the work on that end, and you don't have to have a heavy control server node or tower. Then there's so many cool things about our space. And everybody's integrating and working together. It's not like there's this huge competition in some sense. So I always love that about it. And so even my talk, which was sort of a smackdown between all these different things, was saying, hey, it really depends on your use case and what you're trying to do.
Right. Yeah, and I just used it because we had a tower instance. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, okay, I'll check it out. I don't even remember why I started looking at it in the first place. Because we have Puppet, but nobody's using Puppet on Windows in our environment. And I think
they seem to really have a foothold on the Linux side.
And I've heard that Puppet may be going away in our environment. Maybe. I don't know. I hear stuff. It's not always true.
They're definitely doing some hard work on the Windows side too, in terms of chocolatey partnerships and stuff. I know. So they're working hard on that, and a lot of folks in the community who's still part of PowerShell and Puppet, they do work to change that. They're working to change that reputation to sort of not just be the Linux configuration manager for sure, to be first class for Windows as well. So we'll see how it goes, and everything. I think it's exciting. It's an exciting time. We have all this choice.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chocolaty's awesome. I used it just the other day. I had a ephemeral server that I needed. That's the one that I'm going to install PowerShell 7 on it. So it doesn't have a browser, right? Because it's a server. So I just used Chocolaty, installed PowerShell 7, Visual Studio Code,
nice.
NXLog, done.
In one line. Yeah. That's my favorite thing about it. And I'll tell you honestly, John, I pinch myself every day to be working with folks on the Chocolaty side. It's so exciting. And a guy like Rob, who's actually literally in the chat right now, the founder and the guy who runs
Rob's awesome.
Yeah, so awesome, right? To have that guy as a boss, it's kind of unreal. I still feel very #blessed every day to work with those folks and Stevie and Joel and those other people. So yeah. Lucky to be here.
So we have been talking for a very long time.
Yeah.
Which is awesome, right? I just feel like we're hanging out. But I do need to wrap this up. But to do that, I've got to ask the famous question. So I'll start with you, Adil, because you were just talking. If you could be a superhero or have a superpower, what would you pick?
That's a really interesting one, because I kind of feel like in the spirit of the community, you kind of want something where you can help others too in that process. Mm-hmm. So I think I don't know. That's a tough question. I think maybe having unlimited resources to solve problems, like unlimited thinking, and energy and intelligence, sort of being omniscient, if you will, and sort of having that ability to solve any problem with enough knowledge, kind of like the Bill Gates of the world, who are kind of going out there with stuff like Gates Foundation and solving a lot of that stuff. That's what I find really cool. Being able to have enough knowledge and power to be able to not only improve your own situation, but others around you, lift them up. That'd be cool.
Yeah. If you were omniscient, though, you could never learn anything.
That's true. Oh, yeah.
That's the tough part.
Yeah. Maybe it's something to aspire to then, yeah.
So what about you, Mike?
I guess I'm much more of a simpleton. I'm not as, I guess, well-versed as Adil. I just want to be able to fly and read people's minds.
Okay. Nice.
The what women want sort of thing. Yeah.
I didn't say that. I did not say that.
Yeah, you'd be in trouble with your wife. She's not going to watch this anyway. Yeah.
I did not say that.
Yeah, flying is a very popular choice.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I hate to fly, but that would be so cool to be able to fly. So, but man, it would just be cool to know what other people think.
I'm not sure I would want to know what other people think.
I think there's a lot of bad that could come with it, but on paper, it sounds great.
You'd have to be very selective. Like, you'd be able to tune in and tune out.
I heard some funny advice around that one time too, actually, because it's like when you think about it, it's somebody was, I forget who it was, somebody definitely in the PowerShell community was telling me the other day. It's like, and it sort of stuck with me a little bit, which is if you actually could read people's minds, you'd be surprised how much everybody's just concerned about themselves. They're probably thinking the same thing of what you're thinking about them a lot of the time. So when you're in rooms where you feel like you could be judged for what you're saying and what you're thinking, it's kind of refreshing to think when you see some people say, oh, people don't care. It's like a negative thing, but it's also like, hey, people don't care. It's okay.
Right. Yeah. Don't worry about
framing it. Right. Yeah. They're so concerned about themselves a lot of times.
They're not thinking about you anyway.
At all.
It's good.
Well, like I said, it sounds good on paper. I'll go with it, but it's probably not as awesome as it sounds in real life.
Hey, but flying is a great one. Stick with flying. I like that.
It'd be cool. Like, just pick up the laptop. I'm off to Summit. That would be cool.
Absolutely. Fly over the traffic.
Yeah. Hey, I'm coming from the East Coast, so it's 5.5 to go to Summit.
Oof. Yeah.
Although I can't complain. Like Glenn's on chat right now, and Josh, and they fly like a day and a half.
Yeah, and they had to cancel stuff for MVP Summit too, coming through. Josh did. That's got to be crazy. It's flying. I'll tell you folks, like specifically you two, like as friends in the industry. One of the things that's hurting for me the most here is like not being able to fly during this period. I'm so used to like being at conferences and workshops and events with Chocolatey this past year or so that it's like I really miss it, guys.
Oh,
I really,
bet.
Yeah. Getting a little stir crazy over here.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay,
hey guys, I just wanted to say this is a huge honor. It's really cool just to be hanging out with the names that are in chat and hanging with you guys. This is just like one of the greatest things for me, man. This is so much fun. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. Thank you both.
You deserve to be here, Mike, very much so. You are always MVP in my book.
Well,
for sure.
We'll see. Maybe a community hero. Who knows?
Yeah. That would be cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good night, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, John. Thank you for continuing this tradition for so long. A lot of us built our career around PowerScripting because I had some learning PowerShell at that time. So I always like to plug you for that reason. Like it's very much was a lot of my introduction to PowerShell, driving in on those podcasts, listening in the car. That to this day I'll go and listen to old ones just for fun.
That's awesome. It means a lot to me to hear that because we usually don't get a lot of feedback unless I see people in person. When I see people in person, it's very cool. Because first of all, they treat me like I'm somebody, right?
I remember seeing you
super weird.
You're the John Walls. Like, wait a minute.
But it's also cool that I know so many people because of this podcast, right? Over such a span of years, it's an amazing thing for sure. Yeah. And now I know you guys too.
Yeah.
There you go. And shout out to Hal when he watches this later.
Yeah.
Sir, we miss you.
Yeah, hopefully he'll be on in a month. So, and Ryan is trying to get into a cycle of recording with a guest in Europe every month, the first Wednesday of the month. So he'll be the first Wednesday, we'll be the third Wednesday is the plan. But, when he's ready, that'll happen.
Very cool.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'm excited about that.
Looking forward to it.
All right.
Rock on. Are you